Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and I wanted to do something a little bit different for today's lesson video. Rather than take a concept and talk about it for a little bit, I wanted to walk you through how I would go about constructing a chord melody arrangement and um, embellish a bit on what I talked about in my chord melody basics videos, which if you haven't checked out, please do, and then come back to this video. It's just a general overview of a lot of the concepts I talk about here, but today we're just going to be applying it directly, and it's going to be a step-by-step walkthrough of how I've arranged this little segment of the Days of Wine and Roses. If you're not familiar with the tune, get a chart for the tune or listen to it a bunch, try find some really great recordings of it, and follow along as best as you can. I will try be as specific as possible and try make sure everything is extremely clear. So let's dive in. What I'll usually do before playing any tune, let's say I've never looked at this tune in my life, is play the melody. And just by doing that for the whole tune, I get to see, okay, where are my spaces, where are the important notes of the melody, what are important phrases, where can I have, and taking note of the spaces, where can I insert little moments, if you would. And then I'll also play it against the harmony so that I have an understanding of how certain notes function against the chord. So for example, this A is the third of an F major chord. So starting right away, just even from the pickup, it's in its purest form, it's as simple as that. It's just C to A. But I like to add a little turn, if you would, just to give it a little not depth, but just to do something a little different. An embellishment, an ornament. And then you'll see I'll play this chord. It's a F major 9 voicing without the third. It's a C triad over an F bass, but the third is already up here. I just have to bar it. So I like the color it produces. So, and then I have this little counter melody inside the chord itself because I'm adding this note here, D, and then resolving on the E flat 7. So we have this against the sustaining melody that's already in the listener's ear. So now this is something I'm going to do a lot of in this arrangement, and it's something I do a fair bit. It's break up chords and sounds because the guitar itself is a very limited instrument. We have 4 fingers, in this case 6 strings, and notes can't be sustained very long, especially if they've got, if they've got to be played on the same strings. There are just limited options. It's not like a piano, even though I try aim for that quality. So what I'll do is break up chords and maybe play a fundamental sound. It could be a root or it could be a shell voicing, much like this case. I've just got E flat, G, and D flat. It's the root, third, and flat 7 of the dominant chord. And then play a sound after that won't really have the root in it at all, but it's contextualized because I've informed the listener of the sound. It's already in the listener's head. So the sound that comes after, I take a spread triad, but instead of playing the root, that G, which is part of the melody, is harmonized with the B flat, and then I've got the sharp 11, which is also part of the melody. Now that little section there, we're going into the next chord. That's a pretty important moment in the melody, so I like to let it shine and not clutter it up with a chord. This is sometimes something I see in students or people who are starting with chord melodies, and I know I had this problem as well, where I felt the need to really fill every space I could. But again, it's accepting the limitation that you are playing by yourself and you can't fill every space. So you pick and choose your moments. And then I decide to resolve it by playing that against the chord and have almost like a melody and accompaniment moment where I have that sustaining and play the rest of the chord after. This is a drop 2 and 4 voicing. We've got D, A sharp, F sharp, and C. And one thing I try to be aware of is my dynamics when I'm playing this. Have that ring out super clear and have the accompaniment a little bit softer, just so you play with that relationship and dynamic of, okay, melody and harmony. So now we go to the next phrase, or the next section. Right? So this one's pretty straightforward. I'm just experimenting with registers. So I've got a melody, and then a high melody and a low resonant chord. I'm playing a G minor add 9. Then a B flat minor spread triad. You can play the 9 if you want. That would actually be a nice development, thematically speaking. Now we're also thinking compositionally. So a nice development from the previous chord, just so there's actually a thread that holds the two together. Right? Then we get to this chord, which is tension. It's an E flat 7 with tensions sharp 11 and 13, and I've removed the third. But how did I get to this chord? I played this voicing, right, which is a minor major 7 voicing from B flat. It's one I use a fair bit. But because melodic minor, and that's what I'm using here to get to the substitution, is infinitely substitutable within itself, i.e. you can move voicings and change the roots freely, it'll work. It'll give you a different sound. So what I've done is take that structure and play a different root. Instead of B flat, I'm playing E flat. And it gives a very different character to it. And I'm setting up the resolution that's coming up here. Now, that's an A minor 9 voicing. What I've done is take C major 7, first inversion, take out the root, or the bottom note, sorry, of the voicing. So take out E, and then put A in the bass. So I've taken out the 5th. Now, I am aware we're in F major, A minor is the 3 chord. Generally, you don't use tension 9 on the 3 chord, but this is an example of where I really like the sound in the context of how things are working. So do follow your ears. It's important to be aware of the rulebook and aware of your fundamentals, because that informs your musical choices and your language. But if you like the sound of something, feel free to experiment. So, right? Then the next few notes of the melody are within the chord itself, and I'm trying to use open strings where I can to have that resonant quality. So, right? Then go to a D minor triad, and this is interesting. If you hold out this E and you keep it sustaining, and you play D minor, you'll have this little harmonic rub. It's really cool. So, and that motion there gives the illusion of moving harmony. Normally it's just a D minor chord. But I'm harmonizing it with a B flat and giving it an illusion that it's like D minor moving to G minor. And then this is again another example of breaking up a chord. I could play this full voicing, but it's a little hard to play. So I'll play the melody, the lowest note, and then play the chord. Also, because it's rubato, and I'm taking my time with the phrasing, I'm not sticking to a strict rhythm. Or in this case, I'm actually shortening the time, or shortening the phrase length. Instead of holding this chord and then playing a C7 and playing the entire melody over that C7 chord, right? I'm using that melody as a springboard to get to the next section. So I'd be playing, then play, try to sustain that C so I have a reference. And then we're into the next phrase. So this is now the closing phrase of this little section that I've arranged for you guys. So, right, I have A over here, and how is that functioning? How is that resolving? Because that's a resolution, but it's on an E minor 7 flat 5. Okay, we have an E minor 7 flat 5 where the A is the 11. And then what I like to do is play with that as a resolution to the chord itself. And notice the dynamics again. I'm playing an accompanying voice. And then I'm at an A7 sharp 5, same voicing here. Using the melody as a springboard again. And then the closing phrase. If I were trying to stick to the harmony, I would play E minor, 7 flat 5, A7, D minor 7, G7, G minor, C, and then we're back to the 1 chord. But I've decided this is again where I would maybe start taking stuff out. I like having that melody that usually occurs over this. Right? I like having that as a springboard to the next idea. And again, it links thematically to what I did before to get into the section. So, sustain. And then we arrive at, right, that nice little closing phrase. That's a point in the melody where the note is sustained out for a long period of time. So this is a good spot to maybe put a phrase that will lead us back to the original melody. Right? As what happens in the tune. So then, I take that, and how did I get to that? Well, I started playing around with this. But I wanted the notes more sustained. I wanted it to feel like a piano player really playing with inner voices. So, I took this chord, G minor add 9, made it a G minor, right? If you find that difficult, it is a big voicing. Do what I was working on earlier. Play the root note, and then let go of it immediately. I mean, try make the transition as musical as possible, but... right? And then I'm playing this. It's, again, first inversion major 7 chord, but I'm having that bar here. If that's still difficult for you, again, break up the chord even further. It'll give you a nice contrapuntal sound and give the impression that there's more going on than there actually is. You could do... what's a great way of doing this? You could do that. It's a simple sound. Just try get creative with it. And here, I revoiced this as C, G sharp, E, and because I wanted that sustained effect, played the D there. Down to C, B flat, and resolving to F. So that's a brief run through of the Days of Wine and Roses, how I would go about arranging something, and we see that I'm trying to pay attention to the tune, the melody, really letting the melody shine, really using space effectively, trying to figure out where I can leave space, where I can fill space, what are my points where I can insert musical ideas or transition ideas, how can I make this feel as resonant as possible. I'm trying to take in as much as complete a picture as I can, and trying to get that across in the arrangement. So I hope this was really helpful for you guys. If you want me to do more content like this, where maybe I come up with an arrangement and I break it down, or if some people are curious about my writing or my compositions, I can do a breakdown of that as well, or kind of a detailed breakdown of something. This would be a nice alternative, I think, to explore on the channel, as well as just a traditional lesson of explaining a concept. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next lesson.